YouTube released an official notice saying that they will no longer allow people to make videos about election fraud on this platform, except for corporate media outlets. They can still talk about it. And I'm your host, Roman from the Epic Times. So the first thing that we need to go through is this notice that was released earlier today by YouTube. So let's read it together. It starts, yesterday was the safe harbor deadline for the US presidential election, and enough states have certified their election results to determine a president-elect. So let's stop right there. That was the first sentence. So in particular, this is really odd timing since just yesterday, the Joint Congressional Committee on Inaugural Ceremonies voted, which is by the way, a bipartisan council, voted against a resolution to acknowledge Joe Biden as the president-elect. And their reasoning was that President Trump and other Republican groups still have lawsuits working their way through the courts which challenge the results. So this committee itself voted against recognizing Joe Biden as the president-elect. However, here's YouTube saying that it's already been resolved. However, let's continue. Given that, we will start removing any piece of content uploaded today or any time after that misleads people by alleging that widespread fraud or errors changed the outcome of the 2020 US presidential election. Now let's pause there. That is something else. This is YouTube saying that they are basically the arbiters of truth, that they know what's true or not, and that even talking about the credible allegations, talking about the sworn affidavits, thousands of them across several states that have been filed in courts, will get you kicked off of YouTube or at least get your video deplatformed. But it goes on, let's continue. And this is in line with our approach towards historical US presidential elections. Now let's pause there again. Really? Because for the last 4 years on YouTube, they allowed thousands, probably tens of thousands of videos from the corporate media outlets, which falsely claimed over and over and over again that Trump colluded with Russia to win the 2016 election. Those videos, which said that Trump colluded with Russia to win in 2016, undermined the trust in our election integrity, just like this states. They also cast a shadow on the first several years of Trump's presidency, which, by the way, this whole thing was completely proven to be baseless. Special counsel Bob Mueller determined, after his long investigations, that there was no evidence of this collusion. And yet, where was this type of statement from YouTube once that report was released? Anyway, I want to skip down to another part of it because the statement is actually kind of long, but there's a very important part here under the heading, Connecting People to Authoritative Information. And it talks about how basically a very small portion of what people watch online is related to the elections, and then it goes on to say, and the most viewed channels and videos are from news channels like NBC and CBS. So what they're basically saying is that authoritative news sources will be allowed to talk about the election, while common plebes like you and me, we can stick to talking about the weather. That's because we don't work for NBC, CBS, or these other corporate media, which they have defined as authoritative news channels. They have basically defined them as the Ministries of Truth. Therefore, what business do we have showing the surveillance footage out in Georgia or going through reams of sworn affidavits from poll observers? I mean, all of that stuff has already been disproven by the mainstream media's fact checkers, so what are we even doing here? You know, Communist China has a policy of one hall, one voice. That means that the party, the Communist Party, controls what can or cannot be said. And over the past, over 10 years now, as I've researched China's Communist Party, I've come to love and cherish American freedom more than anything. But I've also been making videos and putting them on these giant tech platforms for the past 2 years. And honestly, I'll tell you that it feels like working behind enemy lines. Because you have me, I'm in America, I'm an American citizen, and yet I have to run through all these mental hoops when working on my videos. I know I can't say certain words, I can't discuss certain topics, and I cannot use certain phrases lest I get kicked off of the platform altogether or just get censored. So are we really even free? What? Well, my YouTube fact checker says that we are, so I guess that we have nothing to worry about. Anyway, today's episode will continue as normal, but tomorrow, I don't know, we might really have to stick to only talking about the weather. I want to emphasize again, frankly, I don't even know if you'll be able to watch this video. Maybe as soon as we upload it, it'll be taken down by YouTube. But there's one point that I really want to touch upon. It might really be the case that there is a perfectly legitimate explanation to everything that we saw in that surveillance video from Georgia. It might also be the case that the thousands of sworn affidavits that allege some form of election fraud might all turn out to be false. That really might happen. It might even be the case that every single piece of evidence that alleges any kind of fraud in this election might not be proven accurate. Who knows? That really might happen. However, in my opinion, it's neither the job of the media nor the job of these giant tech corporations to act as the gatekeepers of truth. We here at the Epoch Times, we do our investigations, we let you know the facts, we let you know all of our sources as transparently as possible, and then we let you make up your own mind. We don't make any determinations one way or the other, and in terms of who's guilty and who's not, that's not up to us, that's up to the courts to decide. But these giant tech companies like Facebook, for instance, they have independent fact checkers who take our investigations, they take our articles from the Epoch Times, and they call up election officials and they ask, hey, is there anything fishy going on over there? And the election officials say, no, nothing at all. And then our articles are rated false. And you, the viewer, the voter, you no longer have access to this information, at least on Facebook, because now you only have access to the official accounts. And it looks like you won't be having access to this kind of information on YouTube either, starting today. After today's notice from YouTube, you will now likely only have access to what the officials have to say. Are the officials telling the truth? Is there any evidence that they're not telling the truth? How will you know if you're denied access to it? Now, in my opinion, the people who call for censorship in this country often feel like they have good motives behind themselves. And fine, I don't want to assign any bad motives to them. I assume that they have good intentions. But they often don't consider the fact that while today they agree with what's being censored, tomorrow they might themselves be censored. Because when you open up Pandora's box like that, when you allow censorship to take place, who says that it'll always go your way?